There has been a lot of discussion around increasing terrorism incidents with the re-emergence of TTP in KPK and the continued insurgencies in the Balochistan province. This obviously results in increase in the terrorism financing risk in the country. What are your propositions on how to effectively manage this terrorism financing risk, and what role can adverse media play in supporting the institutions in proactively identifying any suspicious terrorism financing activity? Thank you, Arun.
Right. Thank you very much for your question. Unfortunately, the screen in front of me says time's up, so I don't know how much time I have. Basically, if you were to break up your question into two parts, there's one on adverse media and its uses, and the other is upon the growing threat of terrorism and our role and responsibility for curbing financing of terrorism. Now, adverse media generally in banks is primarily used at the time of onboarding or screening, but when there are negative press reports, very few of that, adverse media news is being picked up and analyzed by financial institutions. Just for your information, I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but on the Global Terrorism Index, Pakistan is ranked number 10. And there have been more than 280 terrorism incidents in the past 1 year, in the last calendar year. Over 100 international events that have happened as well, terrorism events. How many of those did you analyze? How many did you actually see from a CFT perspective, whether your counters were actually exposed to them or not, is actually critical. Secondly, culturally, the problem is that when there are terrorism incidents, we generally have a cultural habit of sweeping things under the carpet. Information sharing, although it's an international requirement, is generally shied upon. So we generally have that fear that, if we are going to share information with law enforcement agencies, what would happen? So there is a tendency across our culture not to report. Although I must add here that we as an institution have taken this responsibility and reported several incidents. And the benefit of that has been that, we've always been on the right side of the law. So whenever there was an investigation, our sharing of information actually was used as a starting point. So I think that is very critical, because we don't really analyze when incidents happen. And believe me, the only difference is a lot of people talk about AI. Last year also we were talking about it, but there is a huge amount of data that you have available in your banks, in your systems. The only approach that needs to be developed is a can-do approach. I'll give you a very simple example. There was a WhatsApp message that had 8 images and a few details, and I shared it with my team many years ago that why don't you analyze it? And the response was, there's no CNIC. How do we go about it? Now, we knew the address or the location where those guys were picked up from and where they were residents of. We had their full names and we had their images. And believe me, we just adopted a can-do approach. We narrowed down our search to Karachi because those guys were based here, to the geographical location where they resided, and we found one individual. The only difference is when we start looking at things and we start identifying, and I don't have time, unfortunately, but I could actually share with you multiple incidents where terrorist events took place. We analyzed remittances, and that's just one last thing that I'd like to touch upon. We usually look at transactions in isolation. Bigger picture views are generally not adopted. And my recommendation to our compliance professionals here is try and widen the net, try and widen the data. Try applying scenarios where you don't need system support. All you need to do is use your common sense and analyze date ranges, and the data will start speaking to you, and you will identify a lot of red flags, especially with reference to terrorism financing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hasnain, for such an insightful response. I wanted to take a couple of questions from the audience, but unfortunately, because of the time limitations, I've already got 2 notices to conclude as soon as possible. We will now conclude our panel, and I would again like to thank all my panelists for sharing their detailed insights and experiences with us. I hope that would be very helpful for all the audience in their daily